Distinguished guests, dear friends, my name is Murat Sönmez, and I'm a member of the Managing Board of the World Economic Forum. It is my privilege to welcome our co-chairs for the World Economic Forum on ASEAN 2016 to reflect on the past 2 days. Joining me on stage are Sigve Brekke, President and CEO of Telenor Group, Norway, Kathleen, Group Legal Counsel, YTL Corporation, Malaysia, Yoshiaki Fujimori, President and CEO of LIXIL Group, Japan, Giorgio, Visiting Scholar, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore, as well as a member of the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum. Shahril Shamsuddin, President and Group CEO, SapuraKencana Petroleum, Malaysia, and finally, Salil, Shetty, Secretary General of Amnesty International, United Kingdom. Shahril, I'd like to start with you. You have been quite optimistic when we started yesterday about the potential of ASEAN. Can you reflect on your thoughts based on the past 2 days and the discussions you have been in?
I'll try. It's all now a blur now, but I'll try. As for being optimistic, how can you not be optimistic when there's 630 million people and a bulk of more than half of it young people that's going to be very creative, very connected, and very collaborative to create value for the region. And it's also been encouraging to see that there have been inputs from all angles to make sure that this development in ASEAN would also be inclusive and not just a platform to propel the haves and even and segregate the have-nots and widening the gap, the wealth gap. And I think initiatives like connectivity and proper infrastructure were discussed, and I find it very encouraging that there is a lot of passion behind making sure that people are not disintermediated in this growth. I think that in itself is very encouraging because it's about leveraging human capital, yeah? And in terms of ASEAN, it's about bringing the wealth income level up so that we can trade with each other, and further to that, also be creating valued goods and services that can also be traded with communities outside of ASEAN. So I guess the punchline is ASEAN needs to be not just consumers, a consumer society, but also a productive society that has utility to other communities around the globe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the youth, and I think half of the ASEAN population is under 30, which represents a big potential in this fourth industrial revolution world. And I'd like to, as part of the World Economic Forum, youth plays a significant role in our multi-stakeholder community. And we have a community of 20 to 30-year-old young people from around the world called Global Shapers. There are about 5,000 of them in more than 500 cities. And I'm pleased to say that we have 10 Global Shapers hubs in Asia Pacific. And we have 14 Global Shapers themselves attending the summit. So if you happen to be in the audience, if you can stand up so that a big warm welcome to our Global Shapers. And I encourage all of you, you know, when you feel down, talk to these young people. It is, please be seated. It is quite humbling, but equally energizing when they don't understand borders, they don't understand limitations. They collaborate already, which is part of the theme of ASEAN, integration and collaboration. So when I met them here, I said the future is in very good hands. Salil, I'd like to switch to you. And with all this talk about technology and development and inclusive growth, how do we keep humanity at the center of the discussion and make sure that it is truly inclusive? Your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Murat. I think that, you know, as a friend here just mentioned, that I think in the last 2 days, there's been a lot of recognition that the disparities have grown between the rich and the poor, the wealth gap, and I think that's important, it's been recognized. But we also have to recognize a few other gaps and the relationship between the wealth gap and the other gaps that exist, because they're not separate gaps. So there's a big gap between those of us who are inside these buildings in this room, the policymakers and ordinary people. So we have a gap in terms of how ordinary people see the issues and how we see it. But I think the biggest gap and the biggest challenge that ASEAN countries face is the voice gap. And the voice gap is not unlinked to the wealth gap, that if people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, those who have been excluded, those who are poor, women, young people, refugees, migrants, so there's even religious minorities in ASEAN. These are the people who are not having enough of a voice, and that voice gap actually accentuates the wealth gap. So if you don't have basic freedoms and the ability to voice your concerns, then you cannot think that you're going to create economic production on the one side and somehow the other gap is going to be automatically plugged. You have to take the two things together. In fact, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has always talked about civil, political rights and economic, social rights as being two sides of the same coin, the interdependent and indivisible. Somehow in ASEAN, there's been a thinking that, if you sort out economics, the rest will get sorted out. That's not the global experience.
Okay, so making sure that the voice gap is addressed and giving the opportunity for those who are in more difficult situations than the rest of the community is important. And as one of our 14 systems initiatives, the Future of the Internet is actually looking at that in addition to economic growth and social inclusion. And a pillar of Future of the Internet is the Internet for All. And we had a session on this in our African summit in Kigali a few weeks ago. And through a very, very involved global shapers community, we embarked on a project to connect 25 million disconnected people, unconnected people in northeastern corridor of Africa. So I think, again, the youth plays a significant role in giving the voice to those who do not have the ability to do so. George, at the opening you mentioned that while a lot needs to be done, the trajectory is right. And how can we unleash the potential of the region?
For those not familiar with ASEAN, the ASEAN way seems frustratingly non-linear. But in fact, there's reason for this non-linearity, because many problems need patience to solve. Just before we assembled here, next door we had Michelle Yeoh giving a one-on-one conversation. Some of us would have seen her acting in the movie The Lady, where she played Aung San Suu Kyi. She did it extremely well. In fact, when I met her and her husband, John Todd, in Davos a few years ago, he told me that for a few months, he thought he was living with Aung San Suu Kyi. You look at Myanmar today, a transition which is a miracle that it could have happened so smoothly without bloodshed. Yes, not all problems are solved. There's still many obstacles ahead, many challenges to confront. But there's hope. And I think it's wonderful, Murat, that World Economic Forum has now decided to focus on ASEAN for its regional meetings. Our next meeting will be in Cambodia. Cambodia, which began from year zero again, not a long time ago. 20 years ago, it was still a very dangerous place. And even today, when land is cleared for construction in Cambodia, for development, it begins with mine and ordnance clearance. And invariably, wherever you are in the country, you will find ordnance, which has got to be properly disposed of, even detonated. Those who were born after that tumultuous period are so fortunate in that for them, there's education, life is full of hope. But these things take time. And in ASEAN, there's somehow an ability to endure, and an ability to heal. I was fascinated by the reception Vietnamese gave to Obama recently. I mean, there are places in Vietnam today where dioxin is still a problem, and where children suffer from its effects. But now, American culture is a new world, and it's a world full of hope. And we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, about technology. When we talk about an inclusive economy, our fear is not that the young will not be included. Our fear is that the not so young will not be included. And that is ASEAN today.
Okay. Thank you. Recently, I met a young technology entrepreneur at one of our meetings. I spent 25 years in Silicon Valley before I joined the forum 18 months ago. And I asked her, I said, what do you do? She said, I'm a German nerd. I said, okay, I like you already, and what are you focusing on? She said, I'm building a machine learning engine that can read scientific papers and extract the findings and connect the dots. I said, give me an example. And she said, there are 25,000 current publications on cancer alone. And if you say half of it is not peer-reviewed, there are 10,000 papers, current publications on cancer, and it's impossible for an expert to have read all of that. With that engine, she can zoom through them in seconds, pull out the scientific findings, connect it to other pieces of data, and recommend what can be done. Now, if you think this is a far-fetched reality, those of you who are familiar with the game Go, the Chinese board game, the number of moves on that board is more than the number of atoms in the known universe. It's some number times 10 to the power 170. For a long time, experts, computer scientists included, said computers will not have the capacity to learn master Go. But about 6 weeks ago, Google's AlphaGo engine beat the world master. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times out of 5, so that there's no ambiguity. So now the computers are having this capability to use advanced techniques like machine learning to do what experts do. So as you said, George, it's not just the young, it's the existing professionals who are also going to be affected with the fourth industrial revolution, which means that all of us need to continue to reskill ourselves, which we'll get back to later on. But Sigve, I want to come back to you. You've been in this region for a long time. And how was it when you started? Where is it now? And what's the potential from your perspective?
Well, thank you. I'm representing Telenor, one of the larger global telecom operators, with more than 210 million customers. And our international success actually started very much in ASEAN, in this very country. 17 years ago, we came to Malaysia. And we did so on a belief that we believed in mass market inclusion, so communication inclusion. 17 years ago, mobile telephony or even fixed telephony was for the few, not for the masses. And today, we know that this is something that everyone more or less has. We are very optimistic about the next 17 years in ASEAN. Now then based on the same principle, but this time digital inclusion. And then I'm not only talking about internet for all. I'm talking about digital inclusion when it comes to financial inclusion, when it comes to health inclusion, educational inclusion, agricultural inclusion. All this being possible with the internet platform or the digital platform. Looking then into the next few years, and also kind of summarize a little bit the impression I have from these 2 days. There are 3 challenges I see. The first one is that it's much more difficult now to predict the future than it used to be. And I think it's not about sitting here or in other meetings to trying to figure out how will 2020 or 2030 look like. The importance now to actually be relevant in the future is speed rather than predictability and planning. because the digital revolution we now just see the start of is going to be much, much faster than what we have ever seen before. We will see digital disruptors coming into established businesses and basically destroy business models that we know. So I think execution is now actually much more important than planning. And that's why I hope forums like this can really move from talk into action. And those that continue to talk, those that continue to only discuss policies, will basically not be around some few years from now. So that's my first point. My second point is that we see now that our business doesn't have the borders anymore as it used to be. It's now regionalized and it's globalized. Our last entry in ASEAN was Myanmar. In 15 months after we launched our services in Myanmar, we have 15 million customers, 1 million addition every month. And more interestingly is that in 15 months, 60% of those 15 million customers are active internet users. So they have actually leapfrogged almost 15 years of development into 15 months. And a teenager sitting in Mandalay or in Shan state of Myanmar, it's using exactly the same digital services as a customer we have in Kuala Lumpur. So they don't have the borders anymore. And that's why I also urge the policy makers in this room to make sure that policy also move across borders. We basically need to look at that on an ASEAN level. The third challenge I see is that there is a need for much more partnerships. I'm talking about business partnership. We cannot have vertical silos doing our stuff alone anymore. We need to work much closer in partnership to really embrace the digital channels, but also business-government partnerships. Government should not only be policymakers, they should also invite businesses in to figure out how can we jointly take an advantage of the growth potentials coming forward. So those will be my few reflections.
Okay, thank you. So be fast. In Silicon Valley, we used to say, if you're not real-time, you're history. Exactly. So you need to be fast. Policies have to catch up with reality, yeah, and not get in the way. And that's one of our goals is, can we set up rules for things that haven't happened yet? And how can we unleash the power of these new technologies without, while minimizing the harm, potential harm, but not minimizing its potential? And as a public-private cooperation as our model, that's again one of the areas that we're focusing on as well. And finally, partnership, not just across businesses, but with the public sector is key. Kathleen, education, skills, inclusion, gender, this sounds to be a very key role for ASEAN. What are your thoughts and recommendations on this?
I think as Sigve said, this world is changing so rapidly, and so how do we prepare the children of this generation who start school now for jobs that they don't know will exist when they leave school? And it's also this discussion around artificial intelligence, which you spoke about, and robotics. Will they make jobs that we know redundant? What is going to happen to our workforce? I think fundamental to all this is how we educate the children right from the very beginning. We need to educate them for jobs that don't exist today. We need to educate them to change jobs and to be flexible enough so that, when the job that they thought that they were going to come out to do disappears, that they can do something else. I think the Minister of Indonesia said we need to prepare children to not do one job, but just prepare them to be able to do any job that they're faced with. And so that's really the challenge for the education systems today. I mean, I think a lot of the traditional systems are still based on rote learning and assessments that just test outcomes that are very easy to measure. It's just easy for us to say, did you score 100 marks in your maths? Rather than say, have you learned to think critically? Have you learned to be able to solve the problem before you. So that's something I think that policymakers really need to think about deeply for ASEAN, that when we redesign the school system, we need to look at curriculum. We need to see how we can upskill teachers so that they teach children not just the ABCs, which is great, the 3 R's, but they need to think how to they need to train them to problem solve, they need them to be creative. And that's a huge challenge. And of course, with that comes, how do you upskill the teachers? You know, we're talking about the internet, we're talking about digital economies, but most teachers today trained in the 20th century are not digitally literate. So I think you start with the teachers. You know, teachers must not be afraid of technology. They must be taught to master it, so that they will be comfortable dealing with a whole generation of these young children who are just ready to embark on this digital world. So assessments, school systems, and then of course, what do we do with people, you know, in the workforce when their jobs change? There's huge thinking around how do we reskill, how do we retrain people? And I think that's again something businesses can come in with government. And how do we provide the support and some safety net for these people as they, and happened before in the first industrial revolution. Every time there's a change, there are people left behind. And so, you know, to create a safety net and for government and businesses to work together to retrain and to reskill. And finally, you know, to inculcate this lifelong learning. I mean, how do you deal with situations as they change? You know, you need to be a lifelong learner. And finally, you know, we can't get away from social skills. I think these are the skills that make people successful in the workplace. These are the things that, you know, distinguish someone who might be a straight A student but not be very successful. It's their EQ, and I think it was also said there's something called RQ, your receptive quotient, how much you can receive and learn. So these soft skills need to be developed again, and character, that someone will have the courage to be able to change, to have integrity. So, you know, these are some of the thoughts around education. And then about gender. I think ASEAN, I mean, we still struggle a bit with gender equality. And in Malaysia, and we're not doing very well either. But there is hope. I've just come out of the session as well with Michelle Yeoh. Michelle Yeoh is Malaysian, I think, as most of you will know. And she was asked this question: Michelle, do you always have to play the role of the strong woman? And her answer was, no, I can play a strong man too. So these are some of my reflections.
Thank you. So teach the teachers, lifelong learning, teach that skill, and social skills are important. And when I was in Silicon Valley, one of the questions I was asked is, what's the magic? You know, the sun shines every day. That helps with vitamin D and helps the motivation. The diversity, which I think this region has in spades. And if you look at the company that I was part of the founding team, I'm from Turkey. Our CTO was from Australia. Our head of engineering was Chinese. Head of services was Egyptian. Finance person was Canadian. Our CEO was Indian. And we all met in this sunny place called Silicon Valley. And we hadn't done it before, and we just did it. And in my earlier days in one of the coffee shops, I met this guy. You know, people talk to each other and say, what do you do? He gave me his card, and his title was Serial Entrepreneur. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, that means I failed more often than anybody else. So as we train our people, skill them to be entrepreneurs, I think one of the key factors is to take the fear of failure out of their minds and actually celebrate it. And Sigve, going back to your comment earlier, if they're going to fail, let's do it fast, so people won't even notice that. Fujimori-san, you have successfully globalized LIXIL, and we have some amazing stories on how he's using fourth industrial technology. If we have time, I'll talk about that. It's basically about toilets, but before we get to that, you have also established a significant presence in ASEAN. What were some of the challenges, and if you were to set the path forward, what would your recommendations be?
First of all, I just want to comment on the diversity. I'm totally convinced diversity is the source for innovation. Without diversity, there's no innovation. Coming from an aging society like Japan, and having experienced this globalization, what I'm very much impressed here was the energy and passion for the inclusive growth for ASEAN countries. It's very impressive. The agenda has been, can they really leapfrog to force industrial revolution? I joined many sessions, and that has been agenda all the time. My answer to that is, yes, you can. Now, as you mentioned that 65% of the total population in ASEAN is under 35. A majority of that is millennials. They are the driving force in this fourth industrial revolution to really become a winner in the global competitive market. So we got a great chance, and we need collaboration among government and industries. We need collaboration across ASEAN countries. But there's always a challenge. The challenge is the blocker, which is always regulation and vested interest. And I know policymakers cannot change everything all at once. And I know the policymakers has to have a balance between the stability and the mechanism to allow new, disruptive, and creative business model. So there's somewhere in the balance. One of the ideas that I can recommend, which we did in Japan a little bit, is to create a space or some special economic zone where these millennials can operate in full freedom. They can do anything they want with no regulations and no boundaries. And they experiment it. They make innovations, experiment it, and operate in full operations and just prove it. So, they are, again, the driving force. Give them a chance, nurture them, and believe in them. And that's what I just found in the last 2 days, and it's my conclusion.
Okay, thank you, Fujimori-san. We have 2 more minutes. Do you want to talk about the toilet concept? Or
Well, I just want to say we have about 7.2 billion people in the world. 25%, 2.5 billion, don't have any sanitation. So we are on an agenda to provide the sanitation to many people, and we're committed to provide millions of people get access to sanitation. It's very important for the youth. If the youth is the future of ASEAN, youth is the future of the world, we have to give them a healthy conditions. And that's our mission. On the other side, there's a totally high-end product, which is what we call a smart toilet, that would become not only just do all the functionality, washing and popping up and things like that, but also become a healthcare monitoring. When you sit down, you know everything about your body, and you monitor it, you know your status every day. So that's my vision. And if you go with me,
imagine this scenario. You're in an aging, I'll go a bit deep. You sit, you have your body weight and your fat, water, whatever. I mean, you can do that. You have your heartbeat and all the essentials. And when you get sick, you have to go and give samples and go back 6 months later and to see how you're doing. What if you don't need to do that? Because you give samples every day.
Now, I tell you, Japan is the country where we want to just go ahead that kind of direction. US don't accept much of it. Europe hated it. I think ASEAN, you can adopt that.
Yeah.
This is the biggest opportunity for me.
Okay, Sigve, you had a comment on this?
Yeah, I actually just saw a survey, and there are actually more mobile phones than there are toilets in the world. And if you can do exactly what you said, give all those 2.5 billion people a toilet, I will make sure that when they are sitting on the toilet, they will communicate directly with us.
Appreciate it.
So the Internet of Things from now on includes the toilets. So a lot has been done, and given the size of the market and the young demographics, there's a big opportunity ahead. And the message that I'm hearing is now is the time to put our collective resources together to make it a reality and eliminate as much as possible whatever gets in the way. Whether it's preventing people from having a voice, vested interests, because we all owe it to the young people who are represented here. And whether we do it or not, they'll figure out a way to get it done. So we might as well give them a hand in making it happen. And the World Economic Forum was recently recognized as the officially recognized international organization for public-private cooperation. And for the past 45 years, our model has been to bring multiple stakeholders together to address critical issues. And now we're pivoting to more impact orientation. We've identified 14 systemic issues, which we have talked about here. And we encourage and invite all of you to join us in making them move forward. Sigve, Kathleen, Fujimori-san, George, Shahril, Salil, on behalf of the entire audience here, a very big thanks to all of you for giving us your time, leadership, and your thoughts. So. I would also like to thank our host country, Minister Mustafa Mohammed, to extend our thanks to Prime Minister Najib Razak and the people of Malaysia for their hospitality. Bagi pihak Forum Ekonomi Dunia, sekali laga saya ingin merakamkan jutaan terima kasih kepada Kerajaan Malaysia, khususnya yang amat berhormat Dato Seri Najib Razak, Perdana Menteri Malaysia, dan rakyat Malaysia atas layanan dan kerjasama baik yang telah dihularkan. How did I do? Good? Okay, thank you. It is now my pleasure to announce the location for 2017 World Economic Forum in ASEAN. It will take place in Cambodia, and I'd like to invite Prime Minister Hun Sen to join the stage. Prime Minister, please join us. We have, being a Swiss organization, the tradition to hand a cowbell to the next host country. So, Prime Minister, I'd like to officially announce Cambodia as the next host country and hand you this cowbell. I now would like to invite Prime Minister Hun Sen to for his welcoming speech. Prime Minister.
Excellencies, Madam, ladies and gentlemen. Taking these opportunities, I would like to congratulate and commend Malaysia for the successful hosting and excellent arrangement of the forum in 2016. Cambodia is truly honored and pleased to host the World Economic Forum on ASEAN in 2017. For the past 2 decades, Cambodia has experienced remarkable transformation in political, security, social order, as well as socio-economic sectors. Cambodia has moved from a low-income country to a lower middle-income country. Yet, Cambodia, we have ambition to have the lower middle-income country by the year 2030 and to be the developed country by 2050. However, Cambodia economy holds great potential for higher growth and opportunities for diversification in many areas that indicates a wider scope for investment. Presently, Cambodia's economic growth is driven by traditional sectors such as garment, tourism, construction, and agriculture. This also emphasizes the necessity and urgencies to diversify into new sectors such as industry, agro-industry, and handicraft, which require huge investment. For investors, I'm of the view that this is a golden opportunity that should not be overlooked. On the other hand, in the context of the changing regional architectures, especially the realization of ASEAN Economic Community, as well as the formation of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership and other free trade agreements with other countries and regions, Cambodia is becoming a potential candidate for industrial development by linking to the so-called global factories in Asia through physical, digital, and institutional connectivity. In this regard, prospective investors will get many benefits from investing in major potential economic sectors of Cambodia. The country that is open with young labor force eager to learn, better infrastructure, increased middle-class households, growing in purchasing powers, favorable geopolitical factors, and good cooperation with international community. To showcase Cambodia's culture and civilization, including the potential for future development, we have prepared a short video clip which will be displayed for all of you in a moment. And finally, I would like to reaffirm Cambodia's pride and resolve in hosting the World Economic Forum on ASEAN in 2017. Cambodia would like to invite and anticipating excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to the next year's forum and look forward to welcome you in Phnom Penh next year. Thank you.
Cambodia, Kingdom of Wonder, a slogan attracting millions of visitors. Visitors are fascinated by our past, starting over 1,000 years ago with the great civilization of Angkor, influencing vast areas of Southeast Asia. They are intrigued by Cambodia's recent emergence into the light, by our finding country's peace, stability, and resilience. Our kingdom, with 50 million mostly young and enterprising citizens, is positioned at the center of the ASEAN economic community. Well placed, Cambodia offers strategic connectivity, serving the world's countries wishing to conduct business with us and with our neighbors. We have achieved economic growth that many countries only dream of. 7.7% per year for 2 decades, with no signs of slowing down. Investment, agriculture, banking, industry grows exponentially. The Asian Development Bank, impressed by 11.7% industrial growth in 2015, described Cambodia as Asia's new tiger economy. Infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, airports is being rapidly modernized. 11 special economic zones are operating, many more are being built. Our garment factories employing a workforce of over 700,000 are among the most modern anywhere. Our current 10-year industrial development policy aims at driving Cambodia towards becoming a high-income country by 2050. Our pro-business government encourages the private sector to seize the vast opportunities of taking part in our extraordinary growth prospects. Our beautiful capital, Phnom Penh, Pearl of Asia, develops at breathtaking speed, fast becoming a world-class city, enjoying an expanding mix of cultures and sophistication. Angkor, nearly 1,000 years old, is the world's largest religious monument. Today, Cambodia is on the verge of breaking through to match, even outmatch, our ancestors' extraordinary achievements. Culture, history, development, growth, accessible government, youthful, confident people, all in a country of peace, secure, and politically stable. Cambodia is open for business, open to visitors, open to the world. In 2017, the Royal Government of Cambodia looks forward to hosting the World Economic Forum on ASEAN. We offer you all the warmest of welcomes. See you next year in our kingdom of wonder.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And for those of you, I was in Angkor Wat a number of years ago, and I look forward to going back. It's a breathtaking place and shows you the power of humanity when people pull together. Before we bring this World Economic Forum on ASEAN to close, I'd like to thank everyone who has been involved in preparing this successful summit, from our Malaysian host to the team at the World Economic Forum and our partners. I would like to individually highlight 2 people. My colleagues, Justin Wood. Justin, if you can stand up, please. And Clara Chang. Clara, where are you? It's Clara Chang in the back. Thank you very much for making this happen. It was a milestone meeting for us, our 25th in the region, and the first on ASEAN, and we look forward to the next 25 years. And with that, I now officially declare the World Economic Forum on ASEAN 2016 closed. Wish all of you a safe journey back home, and thank you again.